PC building prices are absolutely insane right now, but if you want to put together the cheapest possible AM5 gaming PC, this is exactly how you can do it. Notice how I didn't say should. Almost all of my gaming PC build guide videos are meant to be as easy to copy as possible in systems that I actually recommend you copy. This one, not so much. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a very capable system, like here's Battlefield 6 getting 112 FPS and even Fortnite getting 218. This isn't nearly as bad of a parts list as I thought it would be, but we're gonna need a few disclaimers throughout this video, so you might not want to skip around for this one, or you might see something out of context. Before that though, real quickly, my name is Zach, and I'm just trying to help you jump into the world of gaming PCs no matter how you want to do it. I make build guide videos that I actually recommend you copy, unlike this one. I have a ton of completely free PC building resources on my website, and we even sell pre-builts if you want to take the easy route. I'm not trying to sway you one way or another. Well, maybe I kind of am, because I actually don't really recommend you copy this one. Let's jump into this parts list, and we'll start with the RAM because that's where the biggest disclaimers gotta be. If you want an AM5 gaming PC, then you'll of course be on the hook for paying these terrible DDR5 prices, and that's exactly why this is a bad idea. To make this as cheap as possible, you'll wanna go with a 16 gig kit instead of 32, and the absolute cheapest one that I found for this video is this Kingston Fury Beast RGB kit that's clocked at only 5600 megahertz. Now, obviously it's not as cheap as possible because we could have gone with like an 8 gig kit or maybe even 4 or use some terrible products. It's not literally as cheap as possible, but this is more realistically as cheap as possible. This not super impressive kit cost me $210, and even during this RAM shortage, that's just not worth it in my opinion. You can still buy a much cheaper 16 gig DDR4 kit for close to half the price if you go with AM4, so that's where you get much better price to performance value. My most recent video before this one is actually a realistic $750 gaming PC build guide for 2026, and if you're debating about AM4 or AM5, that's the exact video I would watch right after this one. Next up, now that we got the RAM, let's go to the CPU, and the cheapest possible non-Athlon, non-something crazy option,
I am not crazy,
is the Ryzen 5 7400F. This is priced a bit under $150 over on Newegg, and honestly, it's not too terrible for that price by itself. I would recommend the 7500F for a few more dollars, just for the record, because the cooling of this 7400F is where some people will have some problems, and the 7500F is just faster. And just as a heads up, neither one of them will come with a stock cooler, but here's where I found out that you can actually buy a stock Wraith Stealth cooler over on Amazon. I have a collection of these here at the office at this point, but sure enough, anyone can snag one of these for just 11 bucks. For $11, that's honestly not that terrible if you really want the cheapest option, because it gets the job done for these budget CPUs. Remember, this isn't actually what I would recommend doing. I'd much rather you get like a $16 ID cooling 214 XT Black, but the purpose of this video is to make it as cheap as possible. Speaking of which, that was the strategy for this motherboard as well, because when I searched for AM5 boards over on PC Part Picker and sorted by the cheapest price, this one was literally at the very top of the list. It's the ASRock A620M-X Wi-Fi, and for $90, this is a tough pill to swallow. What we're losing in terms of value here is the A620 chipset, which makes it super weak in terms of connectivity, overclocking, and all that jazz. We got some weak VRMs on here, so I wouldn't say it's future-proof, because if you want to upgrade to like a 9800X3D, you'll need a better motherboard, and there's also only 2 slots for RAM. That's actually terrible for us because we're starting with that 2x8GB DDR5 kit, so if we ever do decide that we want to upgrade to 32, you know, when the cost of doing that isn't the price of a house, we'll have to get a completely new kit instead of just 2 additional sticks. This is just not a motherboard that I would recommend anybody buy, but it is the cheapest available option, brand new. Next up, we arrive to the SSD, and here's a choice that I swore I'd never make again, but things change, so here we are. I'm just gonna come out and say it, it's a half a terabyte SSD. I know, I swore that I would never do this again, but here we are. It's the Patriot Memory P310 480GB NVMe SSD, and for $78, this makes me almost throw up in my mouth a little. Now, for the super nerds that want 100% accuracy, again, this isn't actually the cheapest possible option. They make much smaller and even cheaper SSDs than this, but I think this is realistically the cheapest option for people like us. Our SSD industry is just a complete mess right now, and a few months ago, this would have been a high price for a better SSD with double the amount of storage. But in 2020, 2026, PC hardware prices are just disgusting, so we're working with what we got. 480 gigs isn't nearly enough, even for the 20 game benchmarking run, which we're about to do here soon. And if you play the big storage games like Call of Duty, this is not gonna be a fun time. Shout out to Helldivers 2, by the way, for trimming their file size from 150 gigs down to just 23. Things like that are super impressive and much appreciated in 2026. How it got to 150 gigs, I don't know, but let's just focus on the positive side of it for now. Now, another thing that's positive is this PSU, and for the 9th time in a row, I think it's the Raid Max Cobra 650 watt unit. This is probably the first component that I do actually recommend on today's parts list. Well, at least if you're building a budget gaming PC. I still wouldn't pair this with like an RTX 5070 or obviously higher, but for the RTX 50 that we have, I think it's perfectly fine. It's a tier C 650 watt non-modular PSU, and it's some of the best valued $40 that you can spend in a gaming PC right now. I actually grabbed mine for 35, but it's been sitting on Newegg for 40 for a while now. Grab them while you can. Next up, we got the case, and I don't necessarily recommend you grab this one. It's the DIY PC ARGB G5 BK, and for $50, this was screaming value on paper, but as soon as I removed the back panel on my Twitch live stream, I understood why it's priced so cheap.
Oh my, instantly regret this.
And yes, again, I know there are a few $40 cases that don't have tempered glass or look like an office PC from 20 years ago. This was the cheapest micro ATX option that I could find that had fans included and at least resembles the look of a gaming PC. It's rocking 4 pre-installed ARGB fans, but one of the problems is that they all have a 3-pin power cable as well as a 3-pin ARGB cable all coming to this hub in the back. Usually there's some sort of daisy chain action or the cables are connected to make it not so cluttered. Obviously not the case here. Excuse the pun. Now, this wouldn't be all that bad if this rat's nest of cables allowed you some expansion or upgrade options, or even just some fan speed control, but as you can see, this hub is only 3-pin and not PWM, and it's also designed for 4 fans, so we don't even have the option to add another one on here. If you were to buy an ARGB CPU cooler or some additional fans, this hub wouldn't even help you out. They almost always come with empty slots for expansion, but this one obviously doesn't. Probably why it's only 50 bucks. So yeah, the cable management was a project to say the least. It also has one of those outdated PSU cutouts, which I used to like back in the day, but now it honestly just looks a little old. And coming from DIY PC, this metal material is as cheap as it gets. It gets the job done, and we didn't have any real problems with cooling, but it's just not a product that I would actually recommend buying. And finally, the last component in here is of course the GPU, and it's yet another one that I wouldn't really recommend buying. You probably already guessed it by now, but yeah, it's the RTX 5050.
Move this man!
This one is specifically the Asus Dual model, and for $250, despite this crazy parts list, it's still probably the worst price to performance component inside this build. Now, I know what you're thinking. I should have gotten an Intel Arc B580 for that exact same price. That is the MSRP, but remember, it's 2026. The price of everything is going up, but for the B580, they've usually been sitting around $260 to $300. For anyone trying to build a budget PC like this, that is still one of the best GPUs you can buy in terms of value, but it's just not the cheapest, so I had to go with the 5050. And again, yeah, I could have gone with like a 3050 or something even worse. I was just trying to keep this on the latest generation. It's not a good choice either way, but here we are. This is what the entire parts list ended up looking like, and even though I haven't exactly been positive about this whole project, this is where I'm the most angry with this type of build. The total cost is $872, and I don't know if I should be mad at myself, AI data centers, NVIDIA, or the commenter that put this whole idea in my brain. This is honestly probably the worst price performance system I've ever built for this YouTube channel, but it's not as bad as I thought. We'll start with the optimized titles like Arc Raiders, because here in 1080p medium, we got a solid 125 FPS. That actually looks pretty good. And if you compare that to my $750 realistic build guide, which I do recommend copying, in 1080p medium, that one only got 108 FPS. Now granted, that build did cost about $120 less than today's build, but at least today's build did better. Here's Battlefield 6, and the cheapest possible AM5 gaming PC cranked out 112 FPS in 1080p low. Compare that to the realistic $750 gaming PC, and that one only got 91. Before running these tests, I would have bet money that my perfectly optimized FPS per dollar $750 gaming PC would have smoked this one, but with an updated AM5 architecture, DDR5 RAM, and that RTX 5050 not being nearly as bad as most people make it out to be, today's gaming PC is actually running quite good. Here's Fortnite running at 218 FPS in 1080p Pro. Compare that to only 153 with the Ryzen 5 5500 and Intel Arc B580 in that last build. And speaking of that last CPU and GPU combination, I think this really highlights that previous build guide video probably was more bottlenecked than even I thought. This sort of CPU and GPU are definitely a little bit more balanced. Here's the rest of the games that we tested, and yeah, the 7400F and RTX 5050 is capable of playing any game in 1080p with a playable frame rate. The only games that got kind of low are Monster Hunter Wilds, but I mean, that still got 61 FPS in 1080p high. Doom the Dark Ages got 65 FPS and medium. All of this looks pretty good, and if you want to see the full benchmarking run, we just uploaded a dedicated video for this build over on the ZTT Extras channel. So yeah, I'm not gonna say this build has good value or anything. Don't forget, we only have a 480 gig SSD here compared to 1 terabyte in that $750 build, but the overall gaming performance of this isn't that bad. If for whatever reason you're interested in building the cheapest possible AM5 gaming PC, I would use this as a starting point, but please spend a little bit more money to get some much needed upgrades. Number one, I would get a B650 motherboard with 4 RAM slots. I get the 7500F instead of the 7400F. I would also get at least a 1 terabyte SSD, and unless you really like the look of this case, I get a much better one like the Lee & Lee V100R Mini. All of that would amount to probably a $900 gaming PC. So for 2026, that's officially the cheapest I'd recommend spending for a brand new AM5 build. Now we know.